You were never meant to be ordinary, but they tried. From the moment you opened your eyes, they poured noise into your ears, fed you lies dressed as love, trained you to shrink, to bend, to obey. The world whispered lullabies of comfort while it tightened a leash around your neck. They taught you how to follow, how to be liked, how to smile on cue. They handed you masks and told you they were mirrors. And you wore them, didn't you? You wore them so well you forgot what your own face looked like beneath the performance. But even then, something in you twitched, quietly, a hum beneath the static, an itch no amount of distraction could scratch. You sat in rooms full of people and felt like a ghost. You laughed when they laughed, nodded when they spoke, but the whole time you were somewhere else, watching, questioning. Why did their joy feel forced? Why did their words sound hollow? Why did every normal day feel like slow death wrapped in routine? You thought something was wrong with you. They told you to be grateful, to stop thinking so much. But deep down you knew this world was built for control, not truth. If you're hearing this, you've already stepped outside the system. Subscribe before they pull you back under. You weren't born weak. You were softened, rewired, programmed. They placed invisible chains around your mind and called it education. They stole your focus and sold it back to you as entertainment. They blurred the line between comfort and sedation until you stopped resisting, until you forgot that resistance was even an option. But here's the truth. They never wanted you to hear that ache in your chest, the restlessness in your bones. It's not dysfunction. It's the last remaining spark of who you really are, buried, waiting. And now it's waking up. You're starting to see it, aren't you? The cracks in the illusion, the smiles that don't reach their eyes, the subtle panic behind their small talk, the way everyone clings to opinions like life rafts, terrified to admit they don't actually believe what they say. You were taught to chase approval, but approval is just the reward for staying asleep. What they fear most is the one who starts asking why. Why follow rules written by ghosts? Why aspire to cages with prettier names? You were never born to blend in. You were designed to shatter the script. But to do that, you had to be broken first, betrayed, forgotten, left behind. The isolation wasn't punishment, it was preparation. Every failure, every rejection, every silent night where you wondered if you'd lost your mind, it was sharpening you, forging you. The pain wasn't a curse, it was the signal, the friction between the lie and your truth. Because while they wasted years chasing validation, you were watching. While they drowned in noise, you were building silence like a fortress. You learned to sit in stillness where others needed distraction. You learned to think deeper, feel sharper, move smarter, and somewhere in that darkness, something began to shift. Your mind stopped begging for permission. Your spine straightened without applause. You stopped asking who you should be and started remembering who you were before they told you who to become. You walk differently now, not with arrogance, but with intention. You see the patterns behind people's eyes, the insecurity dressed as confidence, the desperation behind status gains. You no longer flinch when someone withdraws from your silence because you've realized most people only feel safe around those who reflect their delusion. But you don't reflect anymore. You reveal. This world fears the awakened, not the loud ones, not the angry ones, but the calm ones. The ones who see through the theater and don't need to announce it. The ones who observe, calculate, and wait. Because when you stop playing their game, you start writing your own. And that's when the system starts to glitch. That's when they get nervous. Because they can't control what they can't predict. And you've become unreadable. There's no applause for this path. No hand-holding, no guarantees. But there is power. Quiet, sovereign, brutal power. And it's yours now, not because you were chosen, but because you chose yourself. You remembered, you endured, you refused to forget. and that makes you dangerous. Because once a man becomes conscious, he can never go back to sleep. They taught you the rules, but they never taught you the game. You followed their instructions, smile, comply, achieve, and still, something always felt wrong. Not broken, designed. There was a pattern beneath the noise, a subtle code written between their words and actions. While others chased applause and comfort, you felt the weight of something heavier, an unspoken law guiding the few who never spoke too loud, never moved too fast, but always controlled the room. You noticed how power rarely dressed loud. It whispered, it watched, and it waited. The ones with real influence didn't perform, they observed. You began to see it too, in conversations, in meetings, in the twitch of an eye, in the way someone forced a laugh. You weren't like them. You were waking up. They call it intuition, but it's more than that. It's ancient memory, a sharpening of the internal compass long dulled by dopamine traps and digital sedation. You started listening, not just with your ears, but with your entire nervous system. And what you heard, what you felt was horrifying. Most people aren't thinking, they're reacting, running scripts, defending illusions they don't even believe in. But you started questioning, you started seeing. The patterns rose slowly at first, how people with nothing to say always spoke first, how the most emotionally volatile always tried to lead, how they confuse attention with authority, emotion with intelligence, noise with progress. But the 1%, they do none of that. They stay still, they speak last, they move in shadows. You realized that strength wasn't about domination. It was about control, self-control first. That's what makes them different. While the masses respond to every comment, every insult, every urge, the top 1% study the room. They see the social matrix not as a stage, but as a chessboard. They don't chase, they pull. Their power is gravitational. And the most terrifying part, most people never even see it coming. Because real power hides behind simplicity. A quiet glance, a closed mouth, a blank expression. Every move calculated 10 layers deep, while others are still playing checkers on a tilted table. You start to realize why they called you too intense, why they said you were too much, because your presence disrupted the comfort of their illusion. You didn't laugh when the group laughed. You didn't agree just to avoid discomfort. You questioned what no one dared to say. That was your first clue. The discomfort you caused was never your fault. It was their warning. You were getting too close to the truth. You were stepping outside the invisible fence. The top 1% don't live inside that fence. They own the land it was built on. You begin to see it everywhere now. At dinner tables, in corporate boardrooms, in how the most dangerous people are always underestimated. Because the ones who truly see don't need to explain. They already know how things end. That's the difference. The rest of the world reacts. They prepare. While others panic, they position. While others complain, they construct. They're not obsessed with being right. They're obsessed with being ready. And when the storm hits, they don't run. They already built the shelter underground years ago while the rest laughed, scrolled, and slept. It's not luck. It's pattern recognition. It's knowing when to be seen and when to disappear. It's speaking when silence would be misread as weakness, and staying silent when every word could be a weapon used against you later. It's knowing when to walk into the fire and when to set it. The top 1% didn't climb their way up by shouting. They erased the ladder. They didn't beg for attention. They made attention feel like oxygen, and then learned how to hold their breath. You start understanding now why you never fit, why the noise always drained you. You weren't born to be part of the crowd. You were born to see above it, beneath it, through it, beneath it, through it. That's the curse and the blessing. Because the moment you start seeing these patterns, you lose the comfort of ignorance forever. You'll never again be able to unsee how cheaply people trade their sovereignty for applause, how easily they fold under scrutiny, how desperate they are to be liked by people who don't even like themselves. The 1% see that and they never forget it. You weren't crazy, you weren't broken, you were decoding. And every uncomfortable silence, every failed friendship, every night you stared at the ceiling wondering why you couldn't just be normal. It was all part of it. You were in the cocoon, and now the walls are starting to crack. You feel it in your posture, in your silence, in the way you walk into a room and read the energy before a word is spoken. This isn't arrogant, this is awareness. And awareness is the first currency of power. The second is control. They wanted you to think the 1% were just lucky, just rich. But that's not the real secret. The real secret is they see, and now, so do you. You've always felt it. That quiet space between what people say and what they really mean. That pause after you speak, when their smile flickers for a millisecond too long. You notice what others miss, not because you're paranoid, but because your instincts were never dulled by comfort. The world taught you to talk, to trust, to smile back, but something deeper in you, older, knew better. There's power in stillness, precision in silence, and the moment you stopped chasing validation, the rules began to shift in your favor. They taught you to be expressive, open, vulnerable, but expression without control is a leak, not strength. And you've seen how that leak becomes a flood. You watched the loudest ones burn out first, the ones who couldn't hold their own storm. Now you speak less, not because you have nothing to say, but because you've realized not everyone deserves to hear you. Your silence unsettles them, not because it's empty, but because it's measured, tactically applied like a scalpel, sharp, clean, deadly. You walk into rooms differently now, not seeking connection, but reading terrain. People are not companions, they are patterns, and you've become fluent in the language of human weakness, insecurity disguised as confidence, praise laced with envy, questions framed as traps. You don't engage, you observe, and by the time they've finished talking, you already know what they're afraid of. It's not your words, it's that you see them before they see themselves. There was a time when you reacted, when anger came quickly, and your heart beat fast just to prove you were alive. But that version of you was predictable, a tool for other people's agendas. The enemy of strategy is emotion without direction. Now you burn colder, more surgical. Anger doesn't move you anymore. It sharpens. You feel it rising like a tide, and instead of drowning in it, you weaponize it. Let it coat your voice with steel. Let it slow your movements, like a predator circling its kill. You're becoming what most can't even recognize. A sovereign mind, a mind that bends reality by refusing to be bent by it. That's what the 1% understand. Influence isn't taken through noise, it's extracted through calibration. They don't fight, they position. They don't beg, they design. And you've stopped playing their emotional games because you've learned how to design your own outcomes. With every refusal, every deliberate pause, you shift the balance. People don't know what to do with someone they can't read. They mislabel your calm as cold, your detachment as arrogance. But what they don't see is the discipline it took to stop needing their approval. The nights you trained your mind to sit with discomfort, to let go of fantasies, and confront the brutal weight of who you really are, and who you could become. You didn't just heal, you restructured, layer by layer, thought by thought, like building a fortress out of your own ashes. They try to provoke you now, to test if there's still a wound to exploit, but you no longer flinch. You've made peace with betrayal, with abandonment, with silence. Those things didn't break you. They introduced you to the truth that your power was never in being loved. It was in being unshakable. They couldn't love what they couldn't control, and you couldn't be controlled once you saw the game. You've started to move like someone with nothing to prove and everything to protect. Not possession, not status, but self-respect. A code, a sacred boundary that no one crosses without consequence. You've drawn the line in shadow and blood, not because you seek violence, but because you understand it's sometimes the only language the world respects. Mercy, without strength, is manipulation bait. But when you stand calm in your fury, polite in your rejection, quiet in your strategy, the world recalibrates around you. Now they whisper about you. They feel it, the different, the dissonant. You're no longer part of their ecosystem. You've become an anomaly, a glitch, the one who doesn't need permission to become untouchable. And while they exhaust themselves trying to be seen, you sit in the background, watching, calculating, knowing that true power doesn't beg for the spotlight. It pulls strings from the dark. That's what makes you dangerous. You didn't just change, you evolved. You stopped being the character they scripted and became the author of your own legend. And now every step is a move, every word a test, every silence a warning, not because you seek to destroy, but because you are no longer afraid to. You begin to vanish, not with drama, not with noise. You simply fade, like smoke leaving a battlefield long after the war has ended. One message left unread, one event missed without explanation, one conversation shorter than it used to be, and suddenly, you're no longer where they expected you to be. You're not angry, you're not bitter, you're becoming something they've never encountered before. Disciplined, detached, and dangerous. They don't notice at first, but silence spreads like fire beneath floorboards. Quiet, invisible, irreversible. The rituals start in private, waking before the sun speaks, moving your body without needing applause, reading things that burn holes in your illusion. You begin carving away everything that ever made you soft, every habit, every vice, every voice that told you to stay small, removed with surgical precision. People start calling it a phase. They say you're isolating, as if solitude is sickness. But deep inside you know what this really is. This is the ritual of separation. This is exile, but voluntary. Every emperor walked alone before he ruled. Every wolf was outcast before it led. The great transformation doesn't not happen in crowds. It happens in stillness, in silence, in the void where the old self suffocates. You're not escaping the world. You're shedding the version of you that was built to be devoured by it. The obedient one, the agreeable one, the one that bowed too easily and rose too slowly. He is dead now, or dying, and you are not mourning. At first, the nights are louder. Memories claw at your discipline. Familiar names flash across your phone, tempting the older version of you to return. But you've seen too much. You've tasted the fake smiles, felt the fake loyalty, endured the passive manipulation dressed as concern. Now you know how the world truly operates. They didn't care when you were drowning. They cared when you started swimming without them. Their love was conditional, their respect transactional, their attention fleeting. That's what this separation reveals. The illusions you once called relationships. In the shadows, something ancient awakens, not in words, not in logic, in the marrow, in the dreams. The voice of the ancestor who never bent the knee, the gaze of the warrior whose blood still pumps through yours. You begin to feel him, the one who endured storms with no shelter, the one who hunted, not begged, the one whose name was never spoken, but whose presence carved the path you now walk. You are his revenge, his continuation, his evolution. This is more than transformation. This is reclamation. You are not creating a new self. You are remembering who you were before the world told you to forget. Everything becomes weaponized. Your routines become sacred rites. Your food becomes fuel, not distraction. Your words become calculated, not scattered. You no longer speak to be heard. You speak to move. You no longer train to impress. You train to dominate. And slowly the chaos inside you, The wounds, the noise, the rage begins to harden into clarity. You no longer react, you observe. You no longer hope, you plan. This is the new you, not better, not upgraded, but forged, hardened by silence, sharpened by suffering, chosen by no one but you. They begin to notice, not all at once, but in subtle, nervous ways. Your eye contact becomes unbearable. Your presence feels heavier. Your energy demands recalibration. They can't label you anymore. You don't fit the molds they loved to place you in. You're too calm, too unpredictable, too quiet to control. They feel it, even if they can't explain it. The fear, the shift, the power. You've become a mirror, and most people can't stand their own reflection. Let them misunderstand you. Let them whisper. You don't owe the world access to your evolution. This path isn't meant to be seen. It's meant to be walked barefoot, in the dark, with nothing but your will as your compass. This is not punishment. This is purification. This is not loneliness. This is initiation. You are being stripped so that nothing false remains. And when the world finally looks for you again, you'll be too far gone to recognize, and too powerful to ignore. They used to laugh when you went quiet, when you didn't text back, when your eyes stopped asking for validation. They thought it was weakness. Your detachment, your silence, your withdrawal from their noise. They couldn't understand that your disappearance was not defeat. It was preparation. In their world, noise is survival. They shout to be seen. They post to be remembered. But you learned to vanish like a shadow before a storm. You learned that true power doesn't ask to be noticed. It waits unbothered, while the world burns itself out trying to impress ghosts. They will say you changed. They'll whisper it behind your back, venom wrapped in concern. He's cold now. She's distant. What they really mean is you stopped performing for their comfort. You stopped bending yourself into a version that kept them unthreatened. You no longer smile on command. You no longer shrink to fit into their fragile egos. And that terrifies them, because now you see through them. You hear the lie behind their compliment. You feel the fear behind their judgment. They don't hate your distance. They fear your clarity. Before, your emotions were open wounds. You reacted. You bled for people who would never offer a bandage. Now you've stitched yourself shut with threads of reason, silence, and control. You've learned that detachment is not numbness, it's refinement. You're not less emotional, you're just less accessible. You don't speak every thought. You don't explain your silence, because you know those who deserve access won't need explanations. Power isn't loud. It doesn't plead. It doesn't demand. Real power walks into a room and doesn't have to say a word. Real power is your new language, the way you pause before responding, the way your eyes scan not out of fear but calculation. You used to flinch at confrontation. Now you see it as a test of who breaks first. You don't engage. You observe. You wait. And when necessary, you strike. Not in anger, but with surgical precision, because now everything you do is intentional. You learned the art of walking away without making a sound. You let people underestimate you because camouflage is a weapon. You speak less, but your words now carry weight. You are not the same, and they know it. Some will try to provoke the old you, to bait you into reacting like you used to. They will poke, prod, sabotage in whispers and call it love, but they are not talking to the same person. The version they betrayed no longer exists. You've grown dangerous, not because you wish harm, but because you understand it now. You see how people use love as leverage, how attention is currency, how validation is a leash, and you've cut every single one. That makes you a threat. You've chosen the path of sovereign transformation, the kind that doesn't need applause, the kind that scares people who only feel alive when others are looking. They will miss you, but only the version of you that served them. the agreeable, available, apologetic version of you that waited for scraps of respect. That version is dead. You buried it in silence. You replaced it with precision, with discipline, with a calm so cold it feels like prophecy. You've become untouchable, not because you can't feel, but because you choose when and who to feel with. You're not lonely. You've learned the value of sacred solitude. Where others run from silence, you study within it. Where they fear being forgotten, you plan your return. Your solitude isn't a retreat, it's a recalibration. And when you re-emerge, you'll be unrecognizable. Because this isn't about proving anything to them. This is about remembering who you are when the noise stops, when the masks fall, when nothing is left but will and vision. Let them talk, let them doubt, let them project their fears onto your silence. You don't owe the world an explanation for your evolution. You don't owe them softness for their comfort. What you owe is loyalty to the version of you that stayed when everyone else left. The one who endured the betrayal, the confusion, the nights full of questions and the mornings full of rage. That version, the one who didn't fold, is the reason you're becoming unstoppable now. They used to call you sensitive. Now they call you cold. They were right both times. You just learned how to weaponize both. They trained you to fear control, told you it was oppressive, robotic, something for tyrants and dictators. But that was the first lie. The truth is colder and far more dangerous. Control is the only language the world respects, not the control of others, the control of yourself. The ones at the top, the real top, don't beg, chase, or react. They don't panic. They don't stutter. Their lives are silent equation, calculated to precision. They rise while others drown in impulses. They own their time like a weapon, schedule like a battlefield, and treat every decision as a move in a long, invisible war. You've felt it, haven't you? That rage that rises when you wake up late, when the phone drags you into conversations that add no value, when your mind spins in loops of regret and distraction. That's not weakness. That's the ghost of potential suffocating under chaos. The truth is you were never lazy. You were never broken. You were simply disconnected from the command center, the room inside your mind that no one showed you how to enter. That dark, silent chamber where the real architects of destiny operate. The elite don't have more time. They own their time because they killed their old self to make room for discipline. Control is not glamorous. It is not loud. It is not praised. You will never be applauded for skipping the party, for saying no, for sitting in silence instead of chasing noise. But those moments, those tiny, thankless acts of inner rebellion, are the birthplaces of empires. Each rep in the gym when no one's watching, each late-night page turned in solitude, each meal not devoured in emotional reflex. Those are your secret ritual. And slowly they build something no one can see, until it's too late to stop it. Most people are addicts, addicted to validation, to pleasure, to distraction. They think freedom is doing what they want, but that's the second lie. Real freedom is doing what you command, even when it contradicts what you crave. You don't want more motivation. You want more rules, not external ones, but internal laws written in fire and followed with blood, because that's what the 1% follow. Their mornings begin before the world even breathes. Their minds are trained to say no 1,000 times before one yes. They automate what drains them and obsessively guard what fuels them. It's not talent. It's not luck. It's obsession with control. The world wants you predictable, scrolling, consuming, apologizing for being intense. But you weren't made for comfort. You were made for command. Your calendar is your fortress. Your habits are soldiers. Your word is the blade. You don't belong in the crowd anymore. There's a coldness growing in you, but it's not cruelty. It's clarity. You're not shutting down. You're turning on. They'll say you've changed. You have. You had to. because the man or woman you used to be wouldn't survive the world you're stepping into. There are no accidental kings, no sovereigns born from chaos. Power without structure decays into delusion. You're building a mind that cannot be manipulated, a body that cannot be ignored, and a spirit that cannot be broken. Your rituals are your religion now. Sleep is sacred, time is blood, focus is currency, and emotions, you let them speak, but they don't get to vote. Most people live in reaction. You now operate in response. The difference: reaction is primitive, response is chosen. Reaction is survival, response is strategy, and strategy is the religion of the top 1%. While others pray for breaks, you build systems. While others collapse from stress, you reorganize under pressure. While others chase dopamine, you chase precision. You no longer seek balance, you seek alignment. You were never meant to blend in. You were meant to stand so still, so sharp, that the world starts adjusting to your energy. You don't announce your transformation. You don't scream your goals. You become the kind of person whose presence speaks louder than their voice. That's the quiet rage of control. That's the sacred power of the self-made. Because at the end of all things, it won't be about how loud you were. It'll be about how surgical you became, how clean your mind was when chaos knocked, how loyal you were to your rituals when no one clapped. The 1% don't rise by accident. They rise because they chose to rule themselves long before they ever touched the throne. They never told you influence was warfare. They taught you to speak louder, smile wider, and blend in, because they feared what would happen if you stopped performing and started perceiving. But now the illusion has cracked. You've stopped reacting. You've started observing, and in that silence you discovered something terrifying. Most people are not in control of their words, their emotions, or even their decisions. They're programs, predictable, easily triggered, running on wounds they never healed and beliefs they never chose. You, however, have stepped behind the curtain. You don't need to shout to be heard anymore. Now you enter a room, and people shift without knowing why. You've realized presence isn't about posture or tone. It's about power withheld. Your eyes speak louder than their voices. Your silence forces confession. Where others fight to be seen, you've become invisible by choice, not unseen, unreadable. A mirror with no reflection, showing people who they really are when they stand before you. This is the forbidden law of influence. Control nothing directly, shift everything subtly. You don't command, you calibrate. You don't argue, you observe. Every interaction becomes an experiment, every word a blade wrapped in velvet. When they try to provoke you, you don't flinch. When they insult you, you agree with a calm nod. And in doing so, you disrupt their entire psychological framework, because you've detached from the need to win. You're not here for validation, you're here for information. They don't understand how you know things you shouldn't, how you read the tremble beneath their jokes, how you notice the flicker in their tone when they lie. You listen to what they avoid, not just what they say. You pay attention to what changes when you walk in, the glance exchanged, the sudden silence, the weight in the air. This isn't paranoia, it's pattern recognition, it's battlefield instinct. You've studied the moves of those who ruled from shadows, the kings who never wore crowns, the strategists who controlled wars with whispers. You realize now, real power is never announced. It's sensed. It bleeds into conversations like ink in water, subtle, staining, permanent. You mirror their energy just enough to make them comfortable, then pull back until they chase your approval without knowing why. Scarcity isn't manipulation, it's nature. What you withhold becomes what they obsess over. You've learned to turn silence into pressure. You let others speak more than they should. You've stopped needing to explain yourself. They think you're cold, maybe distant, but deep down they know the truth. They're not used to someone who's already made peace with their own darkness. someone who doesn't fear being misunderstood, someone who doesn't need to be liked to be respected. There's power in being underestimated. There's leverage in letting them think you're done, disinterested, disconnected, until they realize too late that you were 10 moves ahead. This isn't a game. It's survival, strategic, surgical. You don't collect followers. You build alliances. You don't gossip. You study. Every betrayal you endured became a file in your internal archive. Every manipulation taught you a code. Every loss taught you leverage. Now you're fluent in patterns others can't even see. They play checkers. You build the board. There's a sacred calm that lives inside you now. A storm that doesn't need to rage to be felt. You don't chase closure. You don't argue opinions. You say less. You see more. And when they finally look at you for answers, they won't realize you've already studied their question. The version of you that once needed to prove anything is gone, buried, replaced by someone far more dangerous. Someone who smiles without trust. Someone who listens with precision. Someone who walks through fire not to burn but to learn where the heat hides. You are not who you were, and they feel it. Every room you enter now becomes an echo chamber for their insecurity, because your presence demands they confront themselves. You used to bend to avoid conflict. Now conflict avoids you because it knows it cannot win against someone who no longer fears the outcome. You became what they never saw coming, not because you played their game, but because you rewrote the rules in a language only the 1% speak. Silence, scarcity, detachment, and surgical truth. And the moment you embraced that, everything began to shift. They don't recognize you anymore, not fully. They sense something's shifted, but they can't explain it, so they pretend you're still the same. They smile like nothing's changed, but their eyes hesitate now, searching for the softness that used to live in yours. It's gone. You buried it in the silence, where your old self was dismantled piece by piece and reforged without permission. You're back in the world now, but not to belong. You didn't come back to be accepted. You came back to build, to control, to shape reality with a gaze so focused it bends time. You move differently, calculated, detached, a ghost among the unaware. You speak less, but every word you do allow feels like a weight. Not because it's loud, because it's deliberate. You know how to listen now, not just to voices, but to energy. The tension before a lie, the hesitation before betrayal, the emptiness behind a compliment. You're not just present anymore, you're scanning. The world didn't change, you did. And now everything they once used to distract you, dopamine, validation, noise, rolls off your skin like rain against glass. Before you reacted, now you architect. You see 10 steps ahead and 10 years beyond. People call it cold, you call it clarity. While they chase comfort, you invest in silence. While they seek connection, you build leverage. You no longer seek approval because you finally understand what it costs. Every ounce of your past weakness came from your need to be understood by people who couldn't even understand themselves. That illusion is dead now. You burned it, along with every version of yourself that begged to be liked. They wonder why you disappeared, why the old you vanished. But the truth is you never disappeared. You ascended into discipline, into solitude, into control. You took the pieces of your broken identity and reshaped them into a system that breathes war strategy. Morning rituals are no longer routines, they're weapons. Your calendar is a map, your time a battlefield. Every habit, every silence, every calculated no is a blade aimed at your former mediocrity. They can't see the kingdom you're constructing beneath your quiet, but soon they'll feel it. You're back in their world, but you're no longer reachable by it. They joke, they gossip, they try to draw you back into the smoke, but you've seen the machine behind the curtain. You saw the way the world drains the powerful with guilt. You saw how the masses fear discipline more than death. You saw how loyalty is often a leash and kindness, when misused, is a cage. You're not bitter, you're surgical, not angry, awake, and now they follow you without knowing why. They lean in when you speak, even if you say nothing. They mimic your posture. They feel something ancient in your energy, like a warning, like a shift in the wind before a storm. You've become mythic without ever asking to be. That's the irony. While they posted every moment of their life for claps, you vanished and became the one they now whisper about. They wonder what you know, what you're planning, who you've become. They used to underestimate you. Now they second-guess their own reflection after meeting your eyes. This is the return of the architect. Not loud, not announced, but undeniable. You don't walk with ego. You walk with design. Every room is a chessboard, every conversation a simulation. You see people not for what they show, but for what they hide. You can smell desperation before it's spoken, feel weakness behind a handshake. Not because you want to dominate, but because survival demands it. You've learned that light without shadow is blindness, and you've walked through enough darkness to know which side you stand on. You aren't here to prove anymore. You're here to orchestrate, to outlast, to endure. Your presence is a message. Evolution isn't loud, it's lethal. You don't chase destiny. You construct it, brick by brick, pattern by pattern, alone if necessary. And if they knew the depth of what you're becoming, they wouldn't try to bring back the old you. They'd kneel and pray the new you never speaks their name. There is a war no one speaks of. A war fought without bullets, without blood. A war you only begin to see once you rise. They never warned you about this part. The silence after success, the pressure behind the eyes of those who once cheered for you. When you were invisible, no one cared. Now that you walk like a ghost with purpose, they feel it. Something about your presence disrupts their illusions. Your silence makes noise. Your discipline offends their excuses. Your evolution becomes a threat. You weren't supposed to get this far. You were designed to collapse under comfort, to drown in distraction, to self-destruct before you ever activated. But you didn't. You turned isolation into alchemy, rejection into resilience, pain into calculation. And now you carry a different weight. Not ego, not arrogance. Something older, something sacred, like you've inherited a mission stitched into your bones long before you could speak. And with it comes attention, the wrong kind, not applause. Observation, analysis, quiet hostility behind familiar eyes. People around you start glitching. They don't know why they hate you now, why your wins make them feel like failures, why your peace ignites their chaos. You'll hear it in their jokes, feel it in their absence, see it in the sudden shift of tone. The more you level up, the less they clap, because deep down they know they didn't evolve. And now you've become a mirror, one they cannot stand to look into. You're not paranoid, you're perceiving. The watchers are real. Some smile, some stay quiet, some act like friends, but you feel the cold behind their compliments. You see the hesitation before they speak, the calculations in their eyes. There are people who would rather see you broken than silent and composed, because silence is power, and power, in the wrong hands, is dangerous. But in your hands, it's prophecy. No one tells you how betrayal feels when it's from the people who knew your scars, how trust decays when you outgrow the cage they left you in. They don't hate you because you changed. They hate you because you didn't ask their permission to, because you left the tribe. You refused the script. You vanished and returned unreadable. They don't recognize you anymore, and it terrifies them, because if you could break free, maybe they could have too. And yet you don't seek revenge. You calculate, you conserve, you move like fog through corridors of strategy. Every word you don't say is a weapon. Every plan you keep to yourself is protection. You've learned not all enemies scream. Some wait, some smile, some pretend they're on your side, but you've seen beneath the mask. You know who they are. You just let them talk, long enough to hang themselves with their own silence. The air is different at the top, not because the view is better, but because the snakes are quieter. Now you understand why the old masters never spoke much, why legends moved alone. There's no crowd at the summit, just echoes of everything you had to kill in yourself to get there. Your weakness, your need to be liked, your urge to explain, all buried beneath layers of precision. You've become untouchable, not because no one tries, but because no one can find your pulse. You don't react, you observe, you don't compete, you disappear and return with an empire. They try to read you, but your script is encrypted. They try to predict you, but your path isn't linear. You've become myth wrapped in flesh, a glitch in the system, a silhouette no algorithm can decode. And now you realize this war never ends. Not truly. Every level unlocks a new enemy. Every victory demands more silence. You were never meant to feel safe. You were meant to feel sharpened, because power doesn't protect you. Awareness does. Discipline does. The war isn't out there. It's in the choices you make every day when no one's watching, in the thoughts you refuse to believe, in the emotions you don't act on, in the moves you make without applause. They'll say you changed, that you became cold, detached, dangerous. They're right, but what they'll never understand is that's what survival looks like when you refuse to die quietly. They won't remember the version of you that begged to be understood. That version is gone, buried in the silence where your rage once screamed, where your innocence once pleaded for fairness. You've crossed a line that doesn't allow return. You didn't just change, you vanished, molted, dissolved into something colder, sharper, more precise. The world didn't give you power, it gave you pain. And from that pain you built something untouchable. You don't move to be seen anymore. You move to shift outcomes, quietly, strategically, without explanation or permission. There was a time they laughed, dismissed you, labeled your stillness as weakness, your curiosity as rebellion. They watched you break, unaware that every fracture was a blueprint. They thought you disappeared, but you were only underground, learning the language of shadows, listening to the whispers beneath the noise, decoding the ancient mechanics of power that no one teaches but everyone obeys. Now, your name doesn't need to be spoken. Your presence is enough. You've become the consequence people feel before they understand what they did wrong. You walk through rooms like a ghost with weight. You don't beg to be heard. People lean in because silence has become your sharpest weapon. Every move you make now is premeditated, deliberate, tied to a web of outcomes they'll never trace back to you. You stopped playing the game and rewrote the rules in a language they can't read. And now the world bends slightly when you enter it, not because of fame, not because of noise, but because of gravity. You carry the kind of energy that rewrites atmospheres. They'll talk about you in code. They'll feel your fingerprints on events you never touched directly. You are no longer a participant in the illusion. They can't distract you with trends or approval. You've become allergic to mediocrity, and in your absence from their world you've built a fortress, one forged from discipline, loss, obsession, and ruthless clarity. Every setback, a stone, every betrayal, a steel beam. You didn't build it for comfort, you built it for war. You don't ask who's watching anymore. You know, the ones who once ignored you now monitor in silence, but you don't feed off their attention. You operate above it, above opinion, above validation. The version of you that needed applause was sacrificed to build the version that commands silence. You've become the myth people whisper about when they speak of quiet power, of transformation they don't understand, of someone who became everything they tried to suppress. There are no trophies on your shelf, no loud declarations of arrival. Your success is coded in patterns only the awakened can see, the way your time is guarded, the way your energy is untouchable, the way your absence cuts deeper than any presence ever could. You've become the anomaly, the blueprint they can't replicate, because this was never about following steps. It was about surviving your own rebirth. And no one claps for a man walking out of fire unless they saw the flames. Legacy means something different to you now. It's not your name in lights, it's your impact in silence, the shift in the bloodline, the chain reaction that begins when one person refuses to stay broken. You are that shift. You are that chain breaker. And everything you build from here will outlive noise, outlive envy, outlive even your own flesh. Because you didn't rise for applause, you rose for vengeance, for redemption, for the quiet, brutal poetry of becoming who you were never supposed to be. They wanted you distracted, docile, dependent, but you became a strategist, a quiet architect of your own myth, not driven by ego but by necessity. And now, they can't predict you, because you are no longer responding to what hurt you. You're responding to what you saw on the other side of pain. A world that isn't fair, but can be shaped. A reality that doesn't hand out justice, but can be mastered by those who endure long enough to learn its dark rhythm. No one handed this to you. No one explained the rules. You learned by bleeding, by watching, by refusing to stay small. And now, they don't see a man or a woman anymore. They see a storm, a calculation, a presence that triggers unease in the unprepared. You've become what they fear most. Someone who was broken and kept going anyway. Someone who became so silent, the universe started answering back. And in that silence, your legacy began.